All right, guys. Oh, here comes more. I wonder sometimes if it's like if people are having trouble getting into the room. All right. Let's just take a moment and just zero everything out. A moment to kind of just reach into the depths of what's right here in front of us. You know, there's this deep peace that is always right here. And then this weird mechanism that just makes the pathway of least resistance to always take our attention off that peace and on to whatever crazy story is happening. But you can always just take a step back, shift your attention, and experience that peace. If you don't do that, you're missing half of life. Everything in life, you know, we're in a dual world, so everything in life is built on opposites. Everything pushing so far in one direction and then coming back in, collapsing back in on itself and recovering, and pushing far out and coming back in. And most people, all they know how to do is push. All those stories are scramblings of life. And they do that until they fall asleep. And then life just shuts them down so that they can get that kind of coming back together phase. But you should be able to find that for yourself throughout the day. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir a little bit. These, you know, you are people who are coming to a meditation class. But the thing is, when you allow yourself to stop, when you allow yourself to enter back in to the just sort of rest and relax and just introspect phase, when you collapse the stories that you were pushing around, everything's able to flow in you again. It just cleans the pipes out so that when you return to the story, you can see it from angles you hadn't even considered. And sometimes that's a huge deal. But even when it's not a huge deal, even when it's just a tiny shift, a million tiny little shifts add up. And your life will go in completely different directions than it would have gone if you had just continued spinning blindly in the world of stories. You know, there's so much to learn, and there are so many approaches to growth and spiritual growth. But at the core of all of it is that ability to actually step away from the kind of addiction of pushing and pulling at stories. That's the power point, that's the lever that allows you to gain the most. You do that and your intelligence can actually open up and flow. And you'll find you approach life from a different place. The further you go down that road, the more you're going to look around you and realize just how much everyone is suffering. And just how much of that suffering is really just caused not by people going for what they want, but for people going blindly after stories. People who haven't even had time to introspect on what they really want. So they spin and they spin and they spin. So let's step out of the story now. The feeling of it is a feeling of patience and expansiveness. Patience in that you're kind of releasing your sense of time. You're not looking for the beginning or the end. Let go of that now. Sit here as if you've always been here, as if you will always be here. And from that place of timelessness, expand. Just let your awareness take in the entire room at once. Your eyes are not hard focusing on any one thing, but just in complete acceptance of all of it. Your ears available to hear everything that's happening. The sound of the air conditioning, noises outside the window, so expanded that you're even available to hear the sound the clouds are making over your head. Whether you hear them or not, you're available. You're given to that reach. Let your nervous system feel through your skin. Just whatever information the skin wants to pick up. timeless, expansive, available. There are few better doorways out of the story than that. So let's just sit there and enjoy that for a little while, and then we'll talk some more. Timeless, expansive, and available. How deeply can you give yourself? Can you feel there are those little ripples of you, those little layers where you're not given? Can you gently just let them go? Probably takes 10 to 15 minutes to go from being immersed in the story to completely given in a way where all of those little ripples get ironed out. Every week for decades, I watched that shift happen for you. It's like anything in life. It's not hard. It's just different. And that difference creates a little barrier that keeps everyone from doing it. It's not even that uncomfortable for most people, least of all the likes of you who have been coming to classes like this for so long. As a teacher, there's always this idea that there's some next level that's always being withheld from the student. What most students don't realize is that it's as simple as letting go of those ripples and staying in that space. It all grows from there. It empowers your consciousness, shows you what matters. From there, all the teachings grow from just walking around the illusion. In a state of wakefulness and peace. Or from the experiences that you have of shifting out of the story into meditation. Whenever I hear teachers talking about the advanced teachings that they're withholding, I always know I'm dealing with a charlatan. Life doesn't withhold anything from you. And I certainly don't. Even if it keeps me from saying something in a specific way, it's more about what you're ready to hear than what it's willing to give you. It's about what's going to take you the furthest, not what's going to hold you back. timelessness, patience. You feel that subtle shift? That subtle shift is everything. Timeless, expansive, available, listening, brings you to the edge of your seat, but without any tension. Some of you will get to a point where you can kind of feel the resonance of divine sound around your body, like a ringing or a light. And at a deep level, you know that its nature is peace. Charged, intelligent peace. Soften yourself so that it can sink in. Let the cells of your being imitate it. Dance with it. So the line between your sense of self and your sense of it starts to blur. Because what you're experiencing is the rest of you. An aspect of your intelligence that knows the beginning, middle, and end of every blade of grass on this planet, every hair on your head. It flows through all beings. It's the part of you that flows through me and the part of me that flows through you. And those aren't just words. I remember the first time I really saw it. I was sitting in our meditation hall, in the middle of nowhere, Canada. And something had happened to my crown chakra, and I just sort of was oozing, I guess. And I kept finding myself looking through the eyes of other people in the room. Not like a possession. I was them, and they were me. I could feel what it was to be them, see what it was to be them. And I knew in that moment that our separation was actually an illusion. A necessary illusion. But an illusion. You are interacting with yourself. Always. We're one big thing. And some of us are lost. Some of us are hurting. Some of us are vicious. Some of us are victimized. But when you know the you that runs through them, even if in that moment you're not directly experiencing that reality, it changes things. Doesn't mean you don't protect yourself from a harmful person, but it changes your understanding of them, your understanding of what's happening. I got a question emailed to me today, and I'm noticing that the consciousness is trying to answer it, so why don't I read the question? So someone emailed me saying, I remain curious about some of the things that you said in a session from a few weeks ago. As I recall, you said that outside of ourselves, nothing else matters. We are part of a reality which is ongoing and contains only consciousness. And it's funny, when I read that email, I couldn't quite figure out what they were referencing. You know, a lot of the things that I say come through me more than from me. But I'm hearing myself answer that question as we speak. When I say there's nothing outside of ourselves that matters, I don't mean you as a personality in any way. I mean you are having an experience with self. That's what all of this is. Every sentient being on this planet is having that experience, different flavors of it. At a human level, your ability to know that you know, and to wonder what things mean, to wonder what something means about you, is a very special flavor that we don't see often on this planet. But everything around you is you. And I don't mean that in a new agey law of attraction kind of way. I mean, not that those teachings aren't true. I mean it literally. I mean it the way a psychologist means it when they say that every person you met in your dream last night was you. It's a world full of parallel worlds of you. We've split ourselves up to have different experiences. And just understanding that intellectually doesn't really do anything. It's not something worth reading in a book. What I hand you in this class is a tool that can facilitate those sorts of realizations, but for real. You know, not an intellectual understanding, but something that if you really sit in timelessness, I mean really let go of when your session is going to end. Let go of how long you've been sitting there. And just let yourself expand into this eternal moment. If you can abide there, you will slip into those realizations. In my time learning, all sorts of amazing things came about. You know, different powers developed, different abilities. But more importantly, different realizations and understanding of how everything works. When you understand it, you behave in a different way. Okay. So I'm hearing answers to things that are further in the email trying to come out. So let me read this to you. After that, they said, my question to you is, where is the place of morality and kindness? My question is where the place of morality and kindness enter in. I think you have a Buddhist approach to religion, as it were, but I'm puzzled as to your view on the place of and importance of ideas like holiness, the sacred, divinity, goodness, evil, and death. I love this question. Big topics, of course, but after several years of my view on the place of and importance of ideas, but after several years of irregular attendance at your sessions, I don't recall hearing you address these concepts. Okay, let's talk about that. There is a big difference between something that is purely religious and purely spiritual. The two are not mutually exclusive. And there are many religions that have deeply spiritual people at the helm. If not at the helm, at least within the organization. And then there are religions where certain sects of them have stepped quite far away from the spiritual to really just kind of create a list of dogmas. And my point is that there is a huge difference between being kind because you're trying to please a deity versus being kind because as you look out onto this world, you can empathize deeply with the suffering of what's in front of you. First, just you can empathize because you understand through realization that you have your own suffering. And then two, at a more advanced level, you actually can see that what's suffering in front of you is an aspect of you. You know, I don't give you guys a lot of dogma to follow. I did a little more when I first started teaching, I think. You know, I had a lot of growing to do on my own. But I don't give you dogma because, one, I'm not interested in turning this into a religion. What I'm handing you here, you could take into any religion, whatever is culturally makes the most sense for you, and you could bring it to life. You could mine the spiritual texts written from realization in your religions and understand them in a way that some of your leaders might not even really get. You know, I'm interested in helping you on the path of you. And so it's important that I don't allow things to fall down too tight of a line of dogma. And please understand, I'm not saying that your religion is nothing more than dogma. I understand that it has its own spiritual currents. But I'm sure you also understand that of the people that show up on the weekends to participate, it's quite a spectrum of understanding, right? Some are there to show a society that they're holy, which there's not much holy about that. Some are there to really drink deep from the well of what their teachers are putting on the table. And there's everything in between. When you can enter into all of that with the depth that you learn from these simple practices, then your path can become your own personal path to enlightenment. Or if you're in a situation where they have strayed from their own path, you'll be able to recognize it and you'll have the strength to step away. I'm teaching you reality. So the more time you spend in this state, the more you start to see words like good and evil as problematic. You know, good for who? You know, evil for who? You know, there's a teacher of ceremonial magic that I really admire. But she told a story once about, I think it was Pazuzu. So this was a demon. It was the same demon that they taught about, the same demon that shows up in the movie The Exorcist. Okay, those William Blatty books. And she talked about how we call this thing a demon because it was killing off populations in ancient, I think, Mesopotamia, and causing pestilence and strife and all sorts of things. But if you really follow the history back, that entity that we call a demon was really, its purpose had nothing to do with protecting the people. Its purpose was to keep the land healthy, and safe. And so it was actually a respected deity for a very long period of time. But as the area started to get overpopulated and people started abusing the land in different ways, it triggered kind of just this spiritual immune response where that deity had to actually take action to protect the land from the people. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? You know? For who? So we call anything a demon that provides experiences that we don't feel like having. But, you know, any animal living on a factory farm would consider us a demon. Would they be wrong? We've enslaved them. We have separated them from their families, killed their parents. We're going to slaughter them at half their lifespan. And why? Not because we need them to survive. I mean, I don't know, depending on where you live, but I certainly don't live in a place where I need them to survive. People do it because they like the way it tastes in their mouth. Is that good or evil? You know, it's silly, right? It's like, it's good for who? Evil for who? Right? So, you know, you kind of start to step away from those kinds of questions. Holy and sacred is another interesting thing. Holiness is absolutely a part of my spiritual path. Sacred is absolutely a part of my spiritual path. Pious is not. And I'm certain that the person who wrote this didn't mean a fake display of holiness, right? This is a very intelligent person asking these questions. But a lot of times what we see as holy is a display of holiness. And it will come with all sorts of, you know, maybe cultural and traditional regalia and things like that. And that's all fine. You know, in the beginning, it's a way to show respect for something that you haven't fully tapped into yet. It's a way to say, hey, I don't know you yet, but I want to. Please accept this show of respect. You know? Over a period of time, it becomes more functional. It becomes more like, okay, what is sacred to you? What do you hold as holy? And to figure that out, you don't listen to the words that come out of your mouth, right? Because words lie. You look at someone's actions. Like those of you who have been dealing with me in this class for years, do you think I consider this class sacred? I don't come here pious, but have you ever seen me miss a class? You know, that's sacred. I put my money where my mouth is, right? It's like if something matters, then you treat it like it matters. I show up with COVID. I show up while my father is dying in another room, and I find a way to just make that available. I show up if I'm on vacation. You know, if I ever don't show up, something's really wrong. I don't think it's ever happened. So sacred and holy become something very grounded and very real. You look up and you realize that humans are, even atheists, are deeply religious people. Every one of you, every one of us has our own internal religion. Even if we have an external religion, within that external religion, how consistently do you show up? How deeply do you listen when you're hearing the teachings? How much of your day is devoted to touching that sacred space? Do you see? That's the real holy and the real sacred in you that's not performative. And the way you find that for real, because you can spend your entire life going to church or listening to people like me and never get anywhere. If you don't actually start practicing these things, then, I'll be like a nice, comforting thing in your life, and I'm happy to be that, and I think there's value to that. But you will have missed a certain opportunity to take this really deep and make it yours, right? And it's the same with your religions. So I think what I would say is that, yes, those words are a huge part of my life. And I think they should be between the words of everything that I do and teach with you guys. But I don't speak about them overtly a lot because I think at the end of the day, if you're practicing the things I'm giving you, you will naturally find yourself coming from a place of good. You will naturally find yourself feeling compassion for others, feeling more inclusive of others. You'll know when you get stirred up by something that closes you down, and you'll use the tools necessary to open yourself back up. Well, guess what? That's not going to work without kindness and compassion. But it can't be performative. It just has to come from that place of generosity and flow. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think for me, it's just I see that as a very grounded thing, and those terms are very real to me. Like they're so real that I find them in how I approach my life more than in how I think about my life. Like I don't spend a lot of time meditating on them. I just, I know what matters to me and I exemplify that, for myself, so that I'm watering the things that I actually want to have grow. Like people like you. Are there any questions about that? I hope that was clear. It was a great question. I really appreciated that question. All right, guys. So why don't we just go back into the silence for a few more minutes just to ground everything out. But if there is a question, feel free to speak up. Okay, everyone. So this week, I would encourage you to take the teachings of timelessness and expansion and bring them into other areas of your life. See if you can just light things up in a different way. If you do that enough, I think you'll be surprised what you see. Any questions before we end for the night? All right, guys. I'll see you next week. Thank you for coming.